Should be on. All right, we're live.
Okay, if everybody, is everybody there?
Yes.
We lost Mr. West.
His camera's still on.
There he is. Okay, I will call to order the Wilson City Council meeting for work session on April 2020 at 5:07 p.m. And we're not having executive session. We're getting a lot of sound feedback again. Now it's we don't usually do it this way. Do we need to do a roll call now, or are we going to just recognize that the full council is here? And ask if there is any question on the agenda or items on consent. I would like to suggest that when we ask a motion on agenda, that we consider the new business piece forward to coming just after the communications that we have, instead of leaving it till late in the agenda. Someone would need to make a motion to that effect, I guess, if we want to do that.
So, Your Honor, I would make a motion that we approve the agenda with the exception of moving the new business to follow directly after communication.
So we'll have to do that when we get to the actual meeting.
That's the exact motion you're going to make at 7 o'clock.
That was really good, though.
Yeah, it was well done.
Yeah. I thought we already called the meeting to order.
Well, this is work session.
Yeah, you'll have to make that motion in the regular meeting because we can't take votes in work session.
Very good.
But it was perfectly phrased.
I know.
It was good.
The practice. Fabulous.
Are there any councilor concerns? Beyond the normal crises that we have. Yeah.
We're just having a completely normal life.
That's right. That's right. Okay, well, so if there's nothing anybody wants to put on the table right now, let's move into our work session items, starting with our library furniture contract. Mr. Duke.
Coming right up.
Hello, everyone.
Evening, Pat.
Nice to see you tonight. I just want to spend just a couple of minutes talking to you about the library furniture that's coming on the council agenda. I just want to kind of give a general overview, and if you have any questions, let me know. As you may or may not know, this actually started from the library renovation that was completed in 2018. It was a little ways back. And during that, the renovation, we basically did paint and carpet within the building, but we had the opportunity to open up the central area within the library. We created the access to the children's patio. We moved the young adults area around. We updated some HVAC. And the idea is that we're creating a library that is more open and more accessible. Thank you. more accessible for people when they came into the library, is more comfortable for them. And obviously, the original expansion of the library was in 2000, so it's been nearly 20 years. And indeed, the furniture that is now currently on the floor is from that expansion, and about 20 years old. So, so the furniture that we have working on and expanded, again, we're looking to create a community space in the building. It seems actually a little bit weird to think of the library as a community space where people can get together and can meet together. But that's really what the goals are, and to make it comfortable for them. And so, in addition to that, we want to increase the access to power without the building, with all of the people using laptops and their phones and various things. And obviously, we just want a comfortable space where people can read and work within the building. So you know, in general, that's what we've done. We've selected chairs and tables that make it a comfortable place for people to work and to play and talk. In children's, we selected some chairs and other material where parents can be there with their kids and be with the other parents, frankly, and be able to talk to people and be comfortable while they watching the kids. And then by the north windows, you know, next to Wilsonville Road. Again, there's a lot of chairs there and tables for people to be in that space in different, you know, whether they're reading or talking to each other or whatever they're doing. And then the teens it's going to be a little bit more unique in that space because teens are, but again, it's a lounge space. It's a place where the teens can get together and hang out with each other. That's generally what we are doing and what we're after. We selected a company, it's in Portland, Pacific WRO, and we, after a review, these guys, their proposal was modestly lower than the others. They had good options with regard to power within the building. And we actually talked to the library director at Milwaukee, who used them, and they really talked about that their customer service was very good, and they felt good all the way through. So that's what you're looking for as far as that contract, which we hope to get tonight, is simply to be able to push that forward and get the furniture into the building and get it replaced. Even now with some waits this spring, they are hoping to be able to be done by the end of June for the entire project. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Just as a reminder to council, this was actually taken care of in a supplemental budget back in October of 2019.
Okay. The difficult question these days is whether we are prepared to move forward on these kinds of budget plans, upgrades and whatnot in light of what's going on. And that's kind of a city manager question, I presume, that staff has looked at this and is recommending we proceed at this time.
Yeah, this is one of the few that are actually going to make it through the process because it's been so long in the process. And with all the money we put into the remodel, it wouldn't make sense to go forward with old furniture. A lot of that furniture is
20 years old.
20 years old. So, yeah, we've,
years old, yeah.
you know, the timing isn't great on any of these, but this is one of the few that made it through the process.
Okay. And I wanted to ask, we were able to secure multiple bids on this?
Yes, we did. We got 3 beds.
Okay, all right. Council, questions for staff? We good to go? Not seeing anybody jumping up there. That's all you need to know to be comfortable when we get to the meeting. We can turn Mr. Duke loose.
Mayor, that goes for anything on consent. I have staff here to answer any questions. If it's not a presentation, if you have questions about the TV inspection stuff, Martin Montalvo is on standby. If you need any questions answered on that one or any of the other items on consent. Otherwise, I'm going to have them go home.
Okay, so any of the other items on consent? You've got to stumble around my listing here. Here we go.
Well, we will be discussing Resolution 2810, just as a matter of course, because we're going to be talking about grants and stuff tonight, so we can answer any
community
questions you have
sharing,
on that.
Okay. So item B is goods and service for the library is the one we're talking about. We also then have the goods and service contract on pipeline video for the underground pipe inspection. So if council has any question on that item, now would be the time. And we have item C, resolution 2806 is the contract with Moore Excavation on Garden Acres Road water pipeline project.
And so, I think probably you'll want to...
Items, does anybody?
Mayor, I'm sorry, you probably want to move Resolution 2810 to new business under B, because we will be talking about it anyway. So you might as well just pull it off.
When we get to the meeting on the motion on agenda, we'll need to be moving consent item D to new business and be moving new business to up the agenda to follow after our public input.
Yeah, after communications or public citizen input?
Communications.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
That work? Councilor Akeball? You're muted.
Yeah.
There you go.
Unmuting. I just wanted to mention I saw that Councilor West did have a question, it looked like, but maybe I just noticed that in the participants frame, so that's all. I don't know if you were able to catch that, so.
Councilor West, do you have a question?
Yeah, I can even ask it offline. I think we can move forward. We've already moved on, and I can ask.
We're losing you. You're all frozen.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well,
everything's good on my end.
Could not for a minute. You froze completely on audio and video.
Oh, am I there now? Am I coming through?
Yes.
Okay, I can go ahead and ask it offline. I don't think it's super pertinent, and we've moved on.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Questions on consent items that we're disposing of right now? If not, no questions, then let's move forward to our next work session item, which is on the COVID relief grant program for small business. You're really small and in the distance, but I suspect that's Mr. Vance. Yeah.
Yes. This is Jordan Vance, Economic Development Manager, here to present on the Wilsonville Small Business COVID Relief Grant proposal. Let me just share my screen and get the presentation queued up.
Very good. Now, before we have you go forward, I think that it would be helpful to have a little bit of input from Councilor Linville, who worked with you on the committee project. If she would like to say anything, would you at this point, Councilor?
I would. Thank you, Your Honor. I wanted to first thank Kevin O'Malley from who is the CEO of the Wilsonville Area Chamber of Commerce, and thank Jordan Vance, who is the economic development manager for the city of Wilsonville, for all of the work done on the proposal. We spent probably 6 hours or more, and Jordan spent a lot more hours than that actually working through some of these items. And I just wanted to say that we recognize that this proposal may not address all of the issues and concerns. It's been estimated that the impact on small business, not just in our community, but across our state, probably began in February and long before the governor imposed the executive order. So we know that there are many businesses that are hurting, and there just simply is not enough money that the city would have to save small business in the city of Wilsonville. But we recognize that whatever bit can be done to help our small businesses is welcome. And even at this point, as we see other proposals still continuing to come out, the Washington County small business proposal came out last week, as did Lake Oswego's proposal. We know that although it seems like it's been a long time, we've been in this situation less than 6 weeks, and we don't know what is ahead. We don't know whether it's another month, another 2 months through the summer. We don't know what the impact is going to be on all of our citizens in Wilsonville. So I think we did the best that we could in doing an analysis of the other grant programs that other cities have already implemented. We think the only city that is our colleague that has not at this point is West Lynn, with Lake Oswego, as I said, their application process coming out and decisions made last week. Just so you're kind of aware, we had discussions about whether or not to include home-based businesses. That was an option that was out there that we discussed. It was a difficult discussion because we know that for many of those small businesses that do business out of their homes, they are being just as negatively impacted as are businesses that have brick and mortar. Our proposal came forward with the brick and mortar recommendation because we felt like businesses that had the small businesses in the city of Wilsonville were likely to spend the majority of this grant money on overhead, rent, mortgage, utilities, and insurance. And so as the pot seems to get smaller, you make difficult decisions in terms of recommendations. Throughout the process, we utilized the charter that was given to us. We recognized that this was a recommendation to City Council. we also realized that while we had ideas about how this should be done, that the fiduciary responsibility rests with the council in spending wisely and as judiciously as possible the taxpayers' money. And that includes the TLT money, because those monies, as they're passed through from the transient lodging, those monies are paid by the taxpayers, and for a lot of these dollars, we're using them not in their originally proposed or anticipated purpose. So we recognize that there are some things that the city would need to address, and the council would need to address, and in being true to our process, what I wanted to do was to let the council know that while we agreed on the majority of what you see in this grant proposal, there were some things that for which we could not come to an agreement. And it was my promise to the group that we would, that I would honestly bring those issues forward and represent the concerns that were voiced. So as you will see, there are some areas that we wanted to have council input, and one of those areas was the upper size of the what this grant program will fund in terms of employee size. It is the opinion of the Chamber of Commerce that the 80 employee is the appropriate number, and we could not come to agreement on that piece. So what you see in the proposal is 20, and so there's probably a space there that warrants your discussion. In addition to that, we discussed the issue of the hotels that are within Clackamas County, or that are in Clackamas County that were not funded by the Washington Visitors Association. If you'll recall, all of our hotels that are in the city of Wilsonville received $10,000 from the Washington County, or the Washington Visitors Association, Washington County Visitors Association. So that was an area that we were not able to, we wrestled with that. Was the best proposal to make all the hotels whole by offering the $10,000 to the hotels that are within Clackamas County that did not receive that money, or was it best to give straight across the board $10,000 to each? It was the Chamber's recommendation to fund all the hotels. And then we talked about what happens after we've weighted the criteria, and we get to the place of saying, okay, we have many applications. We've applied all of the eligibility requirements, but we still have applications in excess of the funding that is available. How are those handled? We discussed whether it would be a first-come, first-served basis, or if it would be some kind of a random selection after all of the eligibility criteria was put forward. So we're asking that the council deal with that. I will tell you that both Sherwood and Lake Oswego did a first-come, first-served on their grant applications. Lake Oswego had intended to have their grant application process out for 5 business days. But it was on a first-come, first-served basis, and within 3 hours, they received more applications than they were able to fund. So they closed down in 3 hours. In Sherwood, their application went up onto their website on March 28th, and by April 1st, they had closed with indicating that they had received 3 times the number of applications than they had money to fund. So those are issues I recognize, and I think we recognized as a group that this ultimately would be the decision of the council to make, and that it would certainly warrant discussion and consideration. And so with that, I will let Jordan do the presentation on the grant, on our recommendation to the council.
All right, thank you very much, Councilor Linville, and I think it would be appropriate for us to go ahead and have Jordan present that information. Now that you've outlined some of the questions, if he would present the information on the specifically on what the committee is putting forward, and then we'll have a time we can talk about details to the extent the council would like to do that. So, Mr. Vance, please.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you, Councilor Linville, for providing that important context and background. My name is Jordan Vance, Economic Development Manager, and I'm here to present a proposal for small business COVID relief grants. And I know this is a meaty topic, so I'll do my best to go quickly through the presentation to save time for our discussion. A couple of background slides before we go into program eligibility. I just wanted to begin by recognizing the unprecedented and devastating effect of the COVID-19 health crisis on our community's local businesses and their employees, and to let them know that we are here to help and we are committed to working with the business community and restoring the economic health of our businesses. Since March 8, we've seen a staggering 296,000 unemployment claims in Oregon. These are the latest numbers that I saw this morning on the Oregon Employment Department's website. We know this situation is dire, which is why the city is proposing an emergency relief grant program to help stabilize our local businesses that have experienced disruption and loss of revenue due to the COVID-19 crisis. Just to put this effort in perspective, I'm sharing a chart from a recent Eco Northwest and University of Oregon white paper that shows a proposed economic recovery timeline and framework in Oregon and the economic challenges that lie ahead. So you can see right now we're in the middle of the shutdown phase, which is estimated to go until June, optimistically, and at which point we'll move into the reopening phase as businesses seek to resume operations, which could last from June until potentially December. The recovery period starting in December could last between 1 to 3 years, depending on the timeline for a vaccine. So I just wanted to recognize while this grant program is a very important step, it's one lever and during one phase of the city's economic response, and that we'll need to continue to think about short and long-term solutions and the resources needed to accomplish those strategies. The city has initiated a handful of COVID assistance programs so far, totaling around $480,000. The relief grants is a big portion of that, and we've provided resources for utility and rent assistance and gift cards through Wilsonville Community Sharing. I thought all this background would be helpful context, and now we can switch gears and go into the program recommendation for city relief grants. So I wanted to quickly reshare this chart that we looked at 2 weeks ago. This shows the Wilsonville businesses based on employment count, and this was an important guide for the committee in making our recommendation. As you can see, over 63% of Wilsonville businesses have less than 5 employees, which includes sole proprietorships, and 88% of businesses have less than 20 employees. So you can see the majority of businesses in Wilsonville are small businesses, and we thought that focusing on that category of micro and small enterprise is where we could see the most impact with this program. One of the overarching policy decisions is around impact and whether it's more beneficial to give a little to a lot or a lot to a little. So we know there are many ways to slice and dice this program, and we decided that focusing on 2 fixed grant sizes at the levels we determined were 2,000 and 5,000 levels would be a strategy to maximize impact and do both of those. So if we split 100% of the program funding into 2 grant sizes, based on this chart, it would allow us to give 100 $2,000 grants, and 40 $5,000 grants, reaching 140 businesses, or 13% of the total business population, which is the highest coverage ratio on this chart unless we decided to give $1,000 grants out, which some jurisdictions did. Here's a summary of the other Portland area grant and loan relief programs that the committee studied closely. Excluding Portland and Hillsborough, the results from the chart show an average grant size, or an average grant budget of around $260,000, an average maximum grant size of $3,500. So just to clarify, the grant size column, that's the maximum grant size. So our budget of $400,000 is higher than average for smaller cities, and our proposed grant size is well within range. You can see many jurisdictions funded their program through general fund or enterprise fund revenue, and the city's proposal, as you heard, is to use both urban renewal program income and transient lodging tax revenue. I think our model most closely mirrors Portland's grant program, which had a smaller fixed loan amount at $2,500 that they used for micro enterprises, and they reached about 250 businesses with that grant size, and they had another size between 5 and 10,000 for small businesses between 2 and 26 full-time employees. We just heard from associates in Tualatin that they assisted upwards of 54 businesses with their grant program. They did not award any hotels, and they still haven't gotten checks out from their March 31 program deadline. So I think there's still some back and forth with businesses to gather paperwork and W-9s, and the average grant amount for their city was about $4,600. You'll also see that some cities have offered loan programs for businesses trying to access capital greater, upwards of $10,000 to $50,000. So how this typically works is cities work in a referral capacity with CDFI community lenders that would help the applicant access these larger sums of money. So following the April 6th council meeting 2 weeks ago, the city manager appointed a 3-person task force, including Councilor Linville, Wilsonville Area Chamber of Commerce CEO Kevin O'Malley, and myself to make a recommendation on a grant relief program. And we've come up with the following proposal. The budget we were given was $400,000, with the URA money funding general businesses and the TLT money funding hospitality businesses, including restaurants, recreation, and lodging. Like I mentioned, we felt we'd be able to have the most impact by splitting that into 2 fixed grant sizes, $2,000 for micro businesses, which we defined as 0 to 5 full-time employees, including sole proprietorships, and 5,000 grants for small business, which we defined as 6 to 20, or as Councilor Linville noted, perhaps higher. Okay. 6 to 20 or perhaps higher, and the range recommended by the Chamber of Commerce was 80 full-time employees. And then we've recommended a separate approach for local hotels, which we will discuss shortly, and also Councilor Linville referenced. So going into the mandatory criteria, so this set of criteria would immediately determine applicant eligibility or ineligibility. So the business license, businesses must have a current City of Wilsonville business license. We'll be verifying that data. Our business licenses renew on July 1st and are good until June 30th of the following year, so we can verify active status in our database. We wanted to see the owner within 25 miles of Wilsonville and within the state of Oregon, and that would also apply to local businesses as well as franchises. If the business is part of a chain, the franchise must be owned by an individual or an LLC. And upon reviewing this criteria, we think that the proximity to Wilsonville really achieves what we wanted to with the local ownership. So I don't think this requirement is a really required at this point, or really one of the top criteria to consider. Next, with the employee count, the group initially liked the 0 to 20 range, which encompasses about 88% of our businesses. And this is flagged as a discussion point. If we increase this to 80 full-time employees to allow for large employee count restaurants and tourist attractions in town. So the next set of criteria is intended for tiebreakers. So the applicants that meet these requirements will be given a point for each, and the resulting final scores will be ranked, and the idea is that the applicants at the top of the list will be prioritized for grant awards. So we have a few different categories here. We have equity and inclusion. So for minority women-owned businesses, you'd receive a point. Disadvantaged business enterprise or service-disabled veteran, you'd receive a point. We thought that legacy Wilsonville businesses could be an indicator of stability and long-term success. So if you've been in the city for a longer period of time, there might be a higher likelihood that you'll continue to stay here in Wilsonville and employ people in our city. So we have points based on your legacy time in Wilsonville. And then the last criteria is we wanted to prioritize businesses that had not received relief funding from other public sources, whether it be federal, state, county, or other, which includes sources like the Washington Visitors Association. Our recommendation was to exclude nonprofits and virtual and home-based businesses for one of the reasons that Councilor Linville noted, that we think small businesses with a physical structure or brick and mortar location are potentially more burdened right now with the higher commercial rent obligations. And we know that's where most of the grant money will be going for is commercial rent or payroll are likely the two top uses for the funds. So I wanted to give you just a quick glimpse of what the application looks like, and I have the link pulled up here. So I can walk you through it. It's a quick application. It's 2 pages. So this first section is business information. So we're asking for business name, and if we want this program to be deployed expeditiously and as fast as we can, we're asking for W-9 forms up front so we can have the documentation we need to process the application and then cut the checks. So in order to complete the application, you have to submit a W-9, contact information, street address, and then a reminder here that physical location, home-based businesses are not eligible, mailing address, and then from here we go into industry type. So which of the following industries best describes your business? So if it's anything, food and beverage, entertainment, recreation, lodging, those would all be routed to the bucket funded by transient lodging taxes, and anything else would be funded, those grants would be funded by urban renewal dollars. So that would be construction, distribution, warehousing, healthcare, medical, manufacturing, retail, and services. And then what was the business annual gross revenue in 2019? And I know this could be a topic tonight, and this is something we did discuss, is this a eligibility criteria? Is this weighted criteria? Do we want to have a revenue ceiling? The committee decided not to prioritize this and just ask this as a demographic question. And then going into the second page of the application, so this goes into the eligibility criteria. So these questions either will put you in an eligible or ineligible bucket, and then there's the weighting and scoring component on top of that. So does your business have a physical structure or brick and mortar facility in the city of Wilsonville? That's required, so yes or no. Is your business located in the city of Wilsonville? Does the business possess a current city of Wilsonville business license? And we'll be verifying that. Is the business experiencing disruption and financial loss due to the COVID-19 pandemic emergency? Please identify how the business plans to use the grant funds. And we suspect it'll be the majority of businesses will check the top 2, either payroll and employee retention or rent, mortgage lease payments. How many full-time employees does your business have prior to the COVID-19 pandemic emergency? And so we're basing this on the 2019 business license number. So based on the recommendation of the committee, 0 to 5 full-time employees, including sole proprietorship, would be eligible for the $2,000 grant, and then the 6 to 20 range should be eligible for the $5,000 grant, and then potentially anything above that threshold, whatever we decide, if it's 20, 21 and above, or a different number, would be ineligible. How long has the business been operating in Wilsonville? So different point value for each of these answers. And then has the business been formally designated as any of the following for equity and inclusion considerations? If the business is a franchise, is it locally owned, which we're defining as within 25 miles of Wilsonville and in the state of Oregon? And then has the business already received any federal, state, county, or other COVID-19 pandemic emergency relief funding, yes or no? So if the answer is no, we would prioritize those businesses over the others. So that's the application, and then at the bottom, just certifying that all of the information that you've submitted is accurate, and that we'll be verifying based on business license data to verify basic eligibility. And then from there, the applicant would submit. So going into the hotels, the consideration around hotels. So hotels, of course, are a valued hospitality business here in Wilsonville. And as Councilor Linville mentioned, the Washington Visitors Association did send a relief grant to 3 of the hotels in the city. So we were brainstorming on what we thought could be one of the most equitable solutions. And what came to mind is making whole the 3 hotels in the Clackamas portion of the city that didn't receive those checks. And so that would be essentially shaving off 30,000, three grants in the amount of 10,000 right off the top of the TLT funding to distribute to the 3 hotels in the Clackamas portion. But this is up for discussion. There's many different ways to tackle this. So recommendation from the chamber is to treat all 6 hotels the exact same way with any sort of grant treatment. At this point, the hotels don't quite fit into the program framework, which is more designed for small and micro enterprise. So this was a strategy to acknowledge their role as a valued employer and hospitality business in Wilsonville. So there's 2 different, I know there's a lot of interest in getting these grants out the door as quick as we can from all parties involved. There's a few different timelines I think we could work with. An accelerated version has us moving very quickly this week, potentially opening the application up midweek and having it up for 2 to 3 days, evaluating applications next week, and then trying to disperse awards by the end of the month. That would be challenging, but it's potentially viable. I think some considerations are how long we want to keep the marketing period open to make sure we can promote and notify all the small businesses in Wilsonville, to have a couple days to do that. And the chamber has a great audience and newsletters to promote to their small business base. And we have a contact list of business license contacts, small businesses that have participated in Town Center. We work with our commercial property owners who have access to their tenants. So I think together we would do email marketing, media blasts, social media to try to get the word out. So I think that's a consideration, how much time we need to market to potential applicants. How many days we want to keep the application open? Do we want it open 3 days, or do we think 5 is more appropriate? I think operationally on the back end, our finance department has requested about 3 days from evaluation to processing the checks. So I think that's a consideration we need to remember. So 2 timelines to look at, an accelerated timeline and a more realistic timeline, which has us dispersing the loans, the grants the first week of May. So this concludes the presentation. So with this, we can go into questions for council input. I know there's a lot of different ways to dissect this program. So I think there's general reactions on if this is close to what council is thinking for a grant relief program. And then some specific questions for the travel tourism category. Do we increase the cap to 80 full-time employees to include larger employee count restaurants and tourism attractions? And I counted in our business license list, and it looks like we have about 77 or so hospitality businesses, which includes hotels, entertainment, lodging, recreation. And out of that group, 22 of those have above 20 employees. So that's about almost a third. That's 29% of the hospitality businesses have above 20 employees. So that's a question. How do we incorporate lodging and hotel establishments in this program? What do we think is the most equitable approach? And then last, is there other weighted criteria we should consider for tiebreakers? Like Councillor Linville noted, randomized approval, date of submission, or do we want to put more weight on other factors like revenue in our consideration? So with that, I'll turn it over to Council for discussion.
All right, sir. Thank you very much for that information. I think that one of the critical questions for us to really try to focus on is, what is our goal in proposing to spend this money? What is it that we hope to accomplish, or what is it that we think we have the ability to accomplish? And in what way do we think we can influence outcomes or change the course of direction in some significant way for businesses here in town, and how would we focus that? So I would be interested in hearing some discussion on that question if people would like to. Councillor Linville?
Your Honor, I just wanted to mention one thing beyond what Jordan presented, and that is that I spoke with the city of Lake Oswego. They awarded 118 grants out of their $250,000 and out of their budget. They found an interesting thing. They had business licenses taken out on the day that the applications opened up. So I think we need to have that as kind of a discussion about, would we award, is there a lower end? Because we have right now on that recommendation less than 3 years for the legacy, which would not allow any discrimination in terms of businesses that had been in place prior to the outset or April 1 or whatever we wanted to talk about. So I just wanted to throw that out as an additional consideration as the council discusses.
Okay, good. Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Lehan, you and I had a couple of interesting conversations about intent or what our goals are. Do you want to?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about it because anytime a council who has the fiduciary responsibility for these funds decides to spend these funds in a way that was not the taxpayers' original intent, that is a heavy burden on all of us to do that. And even the TLT, and I say this as a person who pays sometimes $400 in a month for TLT, that TLT is supposed to go for marketing for the tourism industry for this area. And so even that, when we decide we're not going to spend that for that purpose, then we have to be sure that what we're spending it for is justifiable. And I think in this case it is, but it is a burden that we have. And so I would say in terms of my goals with this program, it is to have as significant an impact as we can on small businesses in Wilsonville. And knowing that we can't save everyone, and Councillor Linville said this also, there is no perfect way to do this. And as you go up to larger and larger businesses, it becomes harder for our small piece to have an impact. Whereas the small businesses, these modest amounts can mean the difference between them staying in business or not, survival or not. So we want our dollars to go to the places where they will have the most impact in keeping businesses in business in Wilsonville. I do think we need to move these funds quickly, but not so quickly that they are ill-considered or frivolous. Because the piece about fair and equitable is really important, and it is the problem with first come, first serve. First come, first serve tends to advantage businesses that are larger and more in tune. Maybe they have an attorney or an accountant or someone who's watching these things. And the sole proprietor who's doing business on the back of a napkin is going to get left in the dust. So that's the reason for the outreach. I think other cities have found this out. Otherwise, it all gets scooped up by the people who are in the know right away. And so we have a responsibility as a government body to be as fair and equitable as we can be, recognizing that we can't get there, really. But, I mean, we will end up giving money to people who really didn't deserve it, and we will miss some of the businesses that really should have had it. But we do the best we can to be fair and equitable. I was making some notes, but as far as the main questions that are, well, I'll save that for later. But that's kind of where my focus is in terms of priority, in terms of goals. What I think about when we step in and rearrange the taxpayers' funds.
Thank you very much. Other comments? Perspectives? Councilor Ackerbo.
I agree with a lot of what Councilor Lehan just said. I see, building on our conversation that we had during our last meeting about this, I understand that some of the smallest businesses in Wilsonville are really at a critical point right now in being able to meet the incredible stress that they are under and financial stress that they're under as a result of this situation. And as we've heard in the last few weeks, some of the national efforts, the PPP, CARES Act, some of that money has had a difficult time finding its way to the smallest businesses. And so we're all, hurting for those companies. That's not to say that there isn't need on all levels, because I recognize that there is, and there's devastation on all levels. So this is a very difficult conversation and decision for us to make. I do have a sense, looking at some of the other programs that cities have done, seeing what can we learn from that. I'm concerned about allocating the grants based on a timestamp of application, because I can see a number of ways that could go wrong. As Councilor Lehan expressed, people that are closest to the news, I guess, or further away from the news are going to have advantage or disadvantage. But also just logistics. If there's an issue with somebody's Wi-Fi while submitting, or many people hitting a site at the same time, or any number of things that could create more of a mess. I thought this application was sent in. I thought it was, received. Was I supposed to? What kind of response was I supposed to get when? And in fact, Councilor Linville mentioned Lake Oswego's program. I believe they advertised for a week prior to having the open application period. And I see this as something that would have great benefit if we could move quicker than advertising for a week. By taking away the timestamp as part of the allocation criteria, I guess, I think that diminishes the increased issues that could arise from not having as long of a time advertising. So that's I guess one of my concerns. I think that it could be done on, as is being recommended here from the task group on this, to have different point system that is awarded based on criteria, which I think they've done a good job of looking at some potential criteria there. And then as that puts businesses into different tiers, at the point that there's a tier that the funds will not cover everyone within that tier, a random selection within that group of businesses could determine how the funds are allocated. So those are some of my concerns and initial thoughts, and how we can get after making this very difficult decision. But I think moving swiftly is important. I think trying to help where there are businesses that have not received any help at all and are in maybe a very vulnerable spot is also important. And in line with where a lot of our discussion was last week, where we were really, I thought, in agreement on many points last week in our good discussion that we had. So that's kind of my views right now.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. West, would you like to comment?
Yeah, thank you. I have my notes here. Lehan, this is a very sobering moment.
Your audio is really bad.
Before
audio is really bad. We can't hear your voice clearly.
Can you hear me now?
Well, it's when you
Can I talk louder?
It's when you continue to speak that it seems like we get a feedback loop going of some kind. And now you're frozen completely.
Hold on, I'm getting it. 1 second. What's the chat say? We can't hear you. We can't hear you at all now. Can you guys hear me now? No? I wonder if I put headphones in, if that will help. I don't know what to do. Hold on 1 second. Is that better? Yeah. My internet's really bad, you guys. Our neighborhood's been having outages all day, so I'll try to do the best I can. Do you hear me now? I'll go ahead and move forward, but just let me know if you can. I'll wait a second and slow down. Looks like Charlotte can't hear me. No? Brian, can you hear me?
Now, yeah.
Hold on. You you can hear me now, Brian?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to move forward, and I'll go slow in case it starts to freeze up. Thank you for your patience. Our neighborhood's had internet outages all day. So, that Councilor Lehan alluded to is that this is a very sobering, difficult responsibility that we have to reallocate, make budget changes to funds that have already. Are we having problems again? Brian?
Do you want to try your iPad?
I have my iPad next to me.
You want to try it? It might work better.
Should I call you, Brian?
Could he call?
Hey, how do I do that?
Do you want to tell him?
You guys call I have my cell.
You can put them on speaker then.
Call into the Zoom.
Call me or call into the Zoom?
Either call into the Zoom or reinitiate it through the iPad.
Ben, where your audio is on the screen, there's a little arrow, and you can say that you want to connect via phone, and then call in with your cell phone.
There's an arrow.
You can call in on your phone.
I don't see that option on mine either.
Okay.
Hang on, we're going to give you.
I see it.
You see it? I could text
Yeah.
him. Does he have to do anything, like push pound or put the meeting number in? Okay.
Can you guys hear me now? Can everybody hear me better?
Yeah, yes, we can.
Okay, let's try this. You guys, I'm so sorry. I don't know if you guys heard me say this, but our portion of Arbor Homes in Villable have been having internet outages all day. So I have been watching this meeting, and I've had an unstable internet connection, so I apologize. So thank you for your patience.
We were hoping to resolve the technical issues during the test an hour ahead of the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, the team's been aware of it since noon from Villable, so I apologize that they are continuing, but I'm glad that we have this option with the phone. Okay, so thank you. So like I was saying before, and I totally want to echo what Councilor Lehan said, that it is a very sobering task upon our shoulders to have to take the fiduciary responsibility to reallocate funds that taxpayers gave to us for other purposes to try to bring what kind of relief we can for businesses and it be as equitable and as fair as possible. And I have a couple questions I wrote down during the day here and then listening to Jordan's presentation. Jordan, thank you for all your hard work. And I want to give kudos to Councilor Linville. I know that this is not an easy task, and I don't envy the difficult decisions that you guys had to work through with the chamber. So one of my questions is initially about the timeline, Jordan. You gave us a number of timelines. The most recent one has us getting checks out by the end of the month before the first of the month, which may be strategically good because businesses will have bills due around that first part of the month, rents and other things. So is that a doable timeline, a more expedited timeline within by the end of the month?
I will tell you the first timeline that he has published is probably not a reality. I think the second timeline is probably closer to reality based on everything we have to do on the back end. We need at least 3 days to get those checks out. After we review all the applications, we may have to call people and say you didn't submit your W-9. So I think we just need to be realistic that we're going to do everything we can to move as many mountains as we can, but there's certain things that we can't control. And if you want to do a marketing job, and if you want to include like bilingual outreach, because we have businesses in our town that, you know, that will probably be something that we need to do. So if you want to, you know, make sure it's as inclusive as possible, you're probably going to want to have a longer marketing time frame than just 2 days. I would recommend five business days of outreach. I understand that we want to get this done, but you also, you know, is it better to be quick or is it better to get it right?
Okay. I guess with...
And can I, Councilor West, just one other thing.
Oh, go ahead.
There are no evictions, so there's no threat of eviction hanging over anyone's head right now. So I think... And late charges are waived as well. So I think we have some time to really kind of market this in the right way.
Okay. My other quick question is I didn't hear anything about tax repercussions from it being a grant and not necessarily a forgivable loan. I know you guys talked about that.
Yeah.
Can we talk about what that looks like in our program?
Yeah, so we have a disclaimer on the application itself that says that if it is a grant, it is income that they will have to claim on their returns. So depending on whether or not they're taking losses through this year, it'll be different for everyone. So we don't give tax advice, but we do know that it is an issue that they need to be aware of.
Thank you. And my other question is, a simple question here is, can we define what we mean by minority status? Are we talking about anybody who is considered a protected status under Oregon state law, or are we only giving minority status to certain minorities, like, or what it, because that's a pretty extensive list when we look at minority status.
Yeah, we're deferring to just the official designation. So we're saying, are you certified as this type of business? And there's a pre-existing definition, which we can share with council.
Okay. So if they fall within that previous legal definition of a minority business, then that is the definition we're using?
Yeah, minority and women. That's the designation.
Okay.
We're talking pre-certification, though, not just our judgment.
And another important note to point is that we're using the employee count from the business licenses we have on file. We're not asking people to tell us how many employees they have right now, because we're assuming that FTE count has probably been reduced. So we're just going to go based on the applications that have already been submitted on the business licenses.
So we said based on the 2019 business license.
2019 business licenses.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess regarding, I was also wondering if there was an update on the utilization on the funds that have already been made available. Do we know how many citizens have been utilizing our additional utility grants, rental assistance, and the gift card program? Can we get an update on how that rollout has gone?
We can do that in regular session, or if you want, we can do it now. It might make more sense to do it when we're talking about those resolutions. So
either way,
yes, we'll give you an update in regular session.
We're tight on time here, so let's do that in the regular session.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and so I guess regarding the programs, thank you for answering those questions. The programs that we talked about, I'm glad to hear that, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, that mom and pops that may own a national chain, such as like Cordova is a family-owned business here in Wilsonville, but if they reside within 25 miles of the Wilsonville location, then that restaurant would still be eligible, even though they're franchised, to receive support. I think I got that confirmed with Brian earlier today, so I think that I like that. I would want to bring another perspective about nonprofits. I would be inclined to support having funds from the TLT portion of the grants be available to nonprofits that are associated with tourism I can think of a small nonprofit that provides, they're like, I don't know if they're bouncy houses or those bouncy big party type things for touristy type events and stuff, and they're an actual nonprofit small business. There, I'm sure, are some others within Wilsonville, and so making, and if there aren't very many and none of them apply for funds, then the worst thing that happened is that we made it available to them. But I think that if those nonprofits are associated with tourism, that they should have access to TLT dollars. And then my other question was Airbnbs, they do contribute in collecting the TLT dollars, but they're also home-based businesses. Have we talked about how Airbnb or VRBOs, the few that we have within Wilsonville, are impacted, or will the funds be available to them?
Did you want to talk about that?
Airbnbs, I don't know.
So my sense, I think it would meet the criteria because it's a physical structure and they have a business license. So I think it would meet the criteria.
They're eligible.
Even though they're home-based, and I know we kind of said no home-based, and
Not all of them are.
Some are home-based, some are not home-based.
Yeah, some are home-based. Airbnbs are often somebody is renting out a back bedroom. That's definitely a home-based business under these guidelines. Most of the VRBOs, like mine, are a separate building with a separate address from the place where you live. But I only know of two of those, mine and one other, in Wilsonville, which have a business license. So remember, there may be many Airbnbs operating without business licenses which usually means they have not been paying TLT. But those of us with the business license have been paying TLT. So, so it just depends. And I'm sure that's true for many other home businesses. Most, or I don't know about most, but many home businesses don't have a business license. If you're buying and selling on eBay or doing that sort of thing, you probably don't have a business license. Maybe some of them do. We have a number of them who do, but that's kind of that's one of the criteria there is you have to have a business license.
So I would, Airbnb has actually been a very impressive company during this whole entire crisis. They have refunded everybody back their money, and not all companies that are like them have done that. And I know a lot of people use the Airbnb. There's a mother-in-law apartment attached to their current address, or it's a basement that's finished, or I stay at Airbnbs when I travel. I think that would be good if we can. If there's only two of them, it sounds like that's pretty simple, that they should be able to take advantage of that. What was that?
There's only the two of us. I mean, you have a business.
Well, then I advocate for the two of you. I advocate for the two of you if it's necessary, is what I guess I'm saying.
And VRBO, which is me, I certainly have, not all VRBOs, but I have refunded 100%. It comes to about $2,000 that I have refunded for March, April, May. And I don't know what's going to happen by the end of June. So the summer may all cancel as well. So it is a different situation in that when someone cancels, we don't just lose that future revenue. We have to refund money that they already reserved. So it is a little bit different than other kinds of businesses in that regard. It's cash out the door.
Okay, and then I guess I really think it's important to try to, on the TLT side, to include nonprofits associated with tourism, and I wanted to make sure that whoever was doing VRBO or Airbnb were also supported with TLT dollars. And then I would take a little bit of a disagreement with the notion to not include all hotels to receive funds. And I guess my reasoning is that we don't know what funds are available. I don't even know if the federal funds are going to make it to these businesses. We don't even know if Clackamas County is going to come down the road and also contribute funds to different places within businesses or TLT dollars within the county, like Washington County, the Visitors Association did. I would recommend the most equitable way is if you participated in the city of Wilsonville as a hotel, and it turns out that like the Holiday Inn is our largest collector of TLT dollars. To support them means that we are helping support the business that will be able to collect the most TLT dollars in the future as we continue to try to put funds back into this account. So I would say that Holiday Inn, La Quinta, and what was the other one? Motel 6 should also receive TLT dollars. And it would be good because it helps us preserve those dollars coming back in the future. And when we look at equitability, we need to look within our own scope, and our own scope is our city and how we support everybody within city limits. And we shouldn't worry about geographical lines by county. And I would argue that that is the most equitable way to do it. That is, if it's simple, it's clean. If you're a hotel, if you're in Wilsonville, where you're eligible through TLT dollars because you also contributed in collecting them. And is, I guess, my perspective. And I know that there's going to be different ideas and perspectives, and not everybody's going to get exactly how they want it, and this is a tough decision, and I'm not trying to make too many waves, but I guess that's the lens of how I would look at that situation.
Wrap it up, sir. You're going way long, and there's other things to do, and I have yet to speak at all.
Okay, and so then my last thing that I was just going to talk about is I wanted to hear a little bit more about sole proprietors. And my one concern was, and I'm sure this will come up, that if someone's eligible through their business as an employer of the business, they get unemployment. If that has been thought about, or what the thoughts were around that, and then would they still be eligible for grant money? And also making sure that maybe there is a little bit of a nuance for some home businesses is my other thought. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, we're not going to have time to debate all of these details, so really my intent at this point was to try to sort of get the issues framed during work session, and we're going to have a lot of the discussion in the regular meeting. I'm one of two council members that run a business at this point. And I have been involved in the private side for decades in different ways. My observation is that many of the most economically fragile businesses are the very small ones. You look at our business license count, and over 300 of our 1,000 business licenses are extremely small, 0 or 1 employee. Many of those are home-based businesses. There is a chunk, I think it was 7% or something, that represent out-of-town companies that are coming into town to do some kind of business, and they get a business license for that. So we're not talking about those because they're not Wilsonville businesses, not located in Wilsonville. But out of that 300, there's a pretty good chunk that are people that start a business, try to run a business out of their house to help pay their living expenses, pay their mortgage on their house, pay, buy food, take care of their families. And I feel pretty strongly that if we are genuinely going to have a goal of reaching the smaller businesses in our community who are at a scale that $1,000 or $2 would make a real difference to, that we ought to consider having a category for helping out business at that level. And I don't see how our few $1,000s really helps somebody by the time they're running 20 employees and taking in $2 million a year or something or other, that a few $1,000s is a make or break for them. At some point, as businesses grow, they acquire professional advisors. They have an accountant, they have a bookkeeper, they have an attorney, they have relationships with banks and with lenders, and they've set up channels to get through the cash flow ups and downs of a year, through seasonal fluctuations and potentially during longer term fluctuations like this sudden drop that we're seeing right now. I think that the chances of somebody with 0 or 1 employees having those kinds of resources are so vanishingly small that they just really don't exist. So I think that we need to be channeling some of the funds toward very small businesses, and that would mean home-based businesses. In my mind, the business would have to be headquartered in Wilsonville. The home would have to be in Wilsonville. You'd have to have a business license, as Councilor Lehan points out. I also think that in terms of trying to set parameters that staff can really use on these, that it would be desirable to have not just an employee count category, but to have a revenue category. So if we were going to do really small businesses, then you'd say, well, if it went over a certain annual revenue, that they would not be in that really small category, or if they went over another revenue level, but they were in the sort of the middle employee count, that they might potentially exceed that level. So I'd like to see the structure where we are looking at those as eligibility criteria, which makes it easier then for staff to really say, okay, this application fits, this application doesn't, and it's not so arbitrary, I guess, or not so subjective is the word I'm looking for, and you really have a basis for making those judgments. I think we need clear tiebreakers, and I think that some kind of a lottery system kicking in is far more equitable than timestamp or something like that. I think that we do need to have the application period open for long enough for people, even people that might be working furiously to try to keep their head above water, can hear that, oh, there's an opportunity here, and I got to take some time and figure out if I fit, and can get an application in. And to me, that means that we have it open probably for 5 days at least, and ought to be over a weekend. So, like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, or something like that would be kind of where I would go with that. Along those lines of thinking, I cannot conceive of our money going far enough at an 80 employee count to do significant benefits to somebody of that size. I think that given the number of business licenses we have in the 20 and under category, that's where we ought to be talking, and I think that that's important. On the hotels, to me, it looks like a parity question. If we've got some hotels in Washington County, some hotels in Clackamas County, some have received $10,000 each, some have not received $10,000 each. To say, okay, we're going to give $10,000 to all hotels in Wilsonville, then some of our hotels will have received $20,000, and some will only have received $10,000. To me, that's not equity, and it's not parity. I think that as small as we are in Wilsonville compared to Washington County visitors, that some of our hospitality industry has received assistance and some has not. And the best that we could try to do with the magnitude of resources we have is to try to equalize that. So my thinking would be that awards to the three hotels in Clackamas County in Wilsonville that have not received prior funding would be the right way to go. So we're going to have to talk about all of these. I don't want to get into a situation, as was described by Councilor Linville, where people are applying for a business license at the last minute. I think we need to have a cutoff date, something like you had to have the license on March 1 of this year or something or other to be eligible. That's really part of the, that's really when things started to become clear about where we were headed. So I'd like us to use like a March 1 cutoff on having the business license. When we ask somebody, well, how long have you been in business? Well, okay, to me, it's how long have you been in business, here in Wilsonville, and have you had a business license for that whole time? So if you say, well, yeah, I started out of my garage, I didn't have a business license for 5 years. Well, okay, but we could fall in somewhere. So I think the question is how long in business in Wilsonville with a city business license would be my thinking. But, those are kind of my perspectives. I appreciate everybody putting your perspectives out there. We're going to have to work through this detail here in the meeting. We do have another couple business items, and we only have, about half an hour left. So we're going to have to crowd them now in order to get them into work session here. But I think we should move forward to do that. So we'll postpone more discussion on the business relief program then until the regular meeting, and ask if we can have the discussion a little bit on the residential code modernization topic in our very petite 400-page packet this meeting.
Yes, I'll be short on this because I'd like you to have an opportunity to talk about the other item as well. Briefly, I just want to state that we have made the updates from our previous work sessions. Those were incorporated into the package that's in front of you, which was reviewed by Planning Commission and approved unanimously by them. This is a fairly detailed work, and I imagine you may have had a chance to look at it again. We feel everything is working as directed and as we hoped, and that this will be a benefit to efficiently using this residential land that we have left inside the city limits, and also potentially helping with efficient use of future urban growth areas. So with that, I had an example I was going to share with you. I can do that if you like, but otherwise just want to answer any questions you have from your review of the packet.
Thank you, Mr. Polly. We have had quite a bit of discussion on this, and the proposal in front of council tonight codifies the direction that council had indicated they were in favor of, and we should ask if there's anyone that has a question, would like to get an answer now, please indicate. Everybody kind of see where we're at? Remember the discussion? Not seeing any questions for you, sir.
All right, I'll be back later tonight.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Put us right back on schedule. Thank you, Mayor.
And then that leaves us with the commercial recreation and PD plan development zones as the topic that we have left on work session. And that is a question that has been kind of percolating along for several years. We have had some proposals for recreational activity that have had a difficult time meeting our zoning requirements, our zoning rules. And so this whole discussion is something that we need to take seriously, and I would invite some careful discussion after we hear the presentation.
Escape.
Try.
We have Mr. Bradford.
We do, but we're trying to pull up his presentation.
All right.
Exit. Do you want to just go show him? Yeah? Control-Alt-Delete.
Yep. There we go. Which one is?
It's the first one. This one. There we go.
Lost Mr. West's video. I don't know if he can hear me or not. There we go.
There we go. What? Aren't they minimized now?
All right, good evening, Mayor Knapp, councilors. I'm here to introduce the commercial recreation and PDI zones. My name is Philip Bradford, Associate Planner with the City of Wilsonville. As previously stated, the commercial rec in PDI zone topic originally stemmed from citizen and business inquiries. And after hearing those, council directed staff to investigate the feasibility of expanding the allowance of these uses. This presentation will go over the work that's been conducted since the initial direction from council and provide a recap of the feedback that we've received from the most recent Planning Commission work session on this topic and discuss next steps. In response to this topic, staff's hired Angelo Planning Group to undertake a code audit, and they've produced a white paper in late 2019 to assist the city in analyzing the existing policies impacting the commercial recreation uses in the planned development industrial zone. That white paper sought to address two topics, the first of which was to what extent should commercial recreation uses be allowed in the PDI zone? And the second question that addressed is under which parameters should that be allowed to ensure compatibility with the surrounding industrial uses. Staff presented this topic to Planning Commission in January, and the direction that was given at the time was to continue pursuing the topic, given that more commercial recreation uses are desired by the community. But it was also noted that as we do that, we need to ensure that the PDI zone's employment aspects should be protected. Staff was also directed to provide additional data on the subject matter and produce maps that would give a better idea of where these uses would be allowed. So before I begin on the research that we've conducted so far, I just wanted to give some broader context by showing the a multi-tenant industrial facility in Wilsonville that's zoned PDI that contains a commercial recreation use. In this case, it is CrossFit Wilsonville. The commercial recreation uses tend to locate in these multi-tenant structures that have a large floor spaces that are open without columns and high ceilings. Since much of the land in the city is zoned PDI, and there's a restriction on these uses that when they are larger than 5,000 square feet in a single building, and they're also limited to 20,000 square feet in multiple buildings, they are constrained in to the extent that they can locate in the city because much of our land is zoned PDI. So at the beginning of this year, staff conducted stakeholder outreach and spoke to a lot of industrial landholders, real estate brokers, and developers on their thoughts of how a potential expansion of commercial recreation uses would impact industrial properties. And we also spoke to commercial recreation businesses inside and outside the city to gauge the square footage and size of these uses. Much of the feedback was positive, and those surveyed stressed that additional flexibility would be beneficial because that helps in economically constrained periods to have additional businesses that could be potential tenants in these locations, and that a lot of the concerns that one would have about these are mitigated because the peak use times are different between the users. There was also a preference noted for conditional use permits so that we could ensure that a lot of these uses would be under a certain size and wouldn't cannibalize industrial uses in the PDI zone. And based on the outreach, the average size for commercial recreation businesses tend to be between 10,000 and 15,000 square feet. On the larger end of the spectrum, those uses can be up to 30,000 square feet, but at that point, usually they are in custom-built structures such as indoor soccer. So the biggest constraint on expanding these uses in Wilsonville comes from Metro's Title IV. Title IV is part of Metro's growth management functional plan, and it provides and protects the supply of sites for employment land by limiting types and scale of non-industrial uses in the regionally significant industrial areas, and employment areas. So the various size limitations in Title IV limit commercial uses to 60,000 square feet in employment areas. Industrial lands or limit commercial uses to 5,000 square feet, but there can be a total of 20,000 square feet if it's a multi-building complex. And in regionally significant industrial areas, commercial uses are limited to 3,000 square feet with a limit of 20,000 in a multi-structured development. Our code is in compliance with Metro Title IV, so any expansion would need to remain in compliance with these regulations. So to help visualize the constraints that are imposed by Title IV, we've created the following two maps. This map shows the Title IV employment in industrial areas and our PDI zoning shown in the black hatched pattern. And this map shows land that is in Metro's employment designations, which is where we would be able to expand the square footage limitations for commercial recreation uses. Based on the information presented, the staff has the following questions for council. Should we proceed with this project? Are there any ideas in the white paper that are preferred? And if there is any specific guidance further on square footage limitations or any other additional feedback and questions from council?
Okay, there's a lot in that presentation. I've lost Mr. West's video. Don't know if he's still there or not. The long-term issue throughout the metropolitan area has been loss of industrial and employment land to conversion to was essentially functioning as commercial operations. And this has happened over and over and over throughout much of the metro area. So Metro is very sensitive to demands that, oh, we need more industrial land, when so much has been converted to other uses after it's brought in to meet the need for industrial. How to meet the needs of our community and not build onto that bigger issue of loss of industrial and employment, I think is really the challenge that we're facing. So I would be interested in hearing what people are thinking about, not about answers, but maybe about the questions we need to answer and level of interest in asking staff to spend some time on this. Councilor Lehan.
Yes. Well, I think there are a number of issues with regards to this topic. I can't see myself because I'm unmuted? I guess I'm unmuted.
Yep, we got you.
Okay. But one of them is, the main question that we were just asked was by Mr. Bradford, I presume, was do we want him to pursue this? And it would be hard for me to say this is a priority item at this time, because if I were in that business, this certainly wouldn't be the time I would be starting up that business. You know, it's a high-touch kind of business. Most of those operations are, and it might be something that we would want to accommodate a year from now, but I doubt that there's going to be a demand for that right now. I could be wrong. Maybe somebody would like to start one up now, but I think that would be disastrous. I do think that there's a need for this in some zone, for accommodation of this in some zone that is not retail, because they need 2 stories. They operate often on oddball time schedules. They aren't really the kind of neighbor that most retail would like to have, because they don't add to your retail shopping experience. And so they're not a good retail tenant, let's just say. And most retail spaces don't provide the kind of space that these operations need. But I mean, I'm of course a big protector of industrial space and not bringing it in under the guise of industrial and then converting it over to commercial. But this, as we've discussed when we had this before us before, is kind of a hybrid of a thing. It's not really, it's neither fish nor fowl, and doesn't make a really good retail tenant, and it's not what we think of as an industrial tenant. So whether we provide space, accommodate them in somewhere in industrial or in quasi-commercial industrial, I think we need to take them into consideration. I don't think it's a priority this year. That's my opinion.
Okay. Other perspectives? Councilor Linville.
Well, as I looked at the examples of the commercial recreational uses, I would agree wholeheartedly with Councilor Lehan that those would not make good retail neighbors. And I guess the question that I have is, regardless of whether there are requests for new businesses or we have current businesses within the city who would like to have a storefront move to a space that would accommodate their business, I really don't know that. I don't know what moving forward with this would harm at this point, whether businesses were not, whether it was a priority for businesses at this point or not. I also am concerned about the industrial, retaining industrial facilities for business. But I don't know, it seems to me that those could be limited, so we wouldn't have those commercial businesses, recreational businesses overtaking an industrial facility. So as I looked at it, I thought this would be fine, and I certainly don't see a reason why the staff would not pursue it.
Thank you. Councilor Ackerwall?
Thank you. I agree that these commercial recreation businesses, they're not able today, the gyms and stuff, they're not able to be open in most cases. But also through the presentation that some of this discussion touches on maybe for the future when we're looking at if there's openings in different areas in the city and we're needing businesses in spaces, that this could allow for some flexibility that we may see down the road as necessary to help for thriving overall business community. So how that lines up with the prioritization of this project, I understand this month, having something ready to go this month is not going to probably be affecting a lot of businesses, but I guess I still see value perhaps in the future as things continue to evolve and the landscape changes, and it will probably certainly be different than what we had before March of 2020. So I am curious about it, and mindful of our time here, we just have a few more minutes. But as we continue in the future, I understand maybe not this evening, I would be curious to, specifically on the point of the conditional use permit. I noticed in the packet that several other cities, it looks like, use that. So I'd be curious about kind of the push and pull of having that be a tool for looking at how to work with kind of this, you said, Councilor Lehan, the fish nor fowl category, but this other category. So that's kind of where I sit on it this evening.
Thank you. Councilor West, can you hear me? Do you want to make comment?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Now I can.
Yeah. I know we're running short on time. I don't have much to add that wasn't already said. I would agree with both the other councilors, so I'll leave it at that, and I know that we have more coming up. So.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Cosgrove, sounds like there is general interest in the long run, but they're looking forward a year or two, not to a month or two. So I don't want us to lose the investment in the outside study information that came in. So what do you think we should do to proceed?
Well, I think this is just an initial exploration. So all the work that Philip has done will not be wasted. Should this issue come up again, we can just pick up the report and go from there. So I think it's one of those things that was in the queue we had been working on, and then this public health crisis hit. So we thought we'd bring it to you and gauge your interest in seeing if you wanted to move forward now. I certainly understand the sentiment that doesn't make much sense to even look at this right now, given the nature of what we're dealing with, but maybe at some point in the future it will.
Yeah, and if we end up with any times a year that are a little slower, it might be something to consider at that point. I don't know when that will be here soon, but
yeah.
My own view is that those smaller ones in the 10,000 square foot range, might make more sense in some of our areas, and certainly the 20 or 30 or 40,000 square foot ones are an entirely different animal, and I have a hard time seeing how that fits in quite the same way in what we've got here. But all of those factors and others would have to be thought about.
Great.
Okay, that is all of our work session items, I think, isn't it?
No, just real quickly, I have a couple things I want to run by you, and I'll try and do it in under 4 minutes. But
okay.
I think there's probably general agreement that going out for a parks bond right now would be tone deaf. If you agree with that, simply nod your head. We can dispense with that. Okay? Second thing is, we have a bunch of events and things that we need to nail down in terms of timing for events, like our community block party, opening up the water features. We talked about this in our incident command meeting today. It makes imminent sense to me just to say right now that we're canceling anything between now and the end of August. That would include
summer concerts.
everything, movies in the park. I don't see how we're going to get to a point between now and the end of the summer where it's just going to be okay to get out there and mingle again without rampant testing, contact tracing. We're just not anywhere near having the ability to do what we need to do on that end. So I think there may be some loosening of the social distancing standards, but I don't think that they're going to go away until probably fall of 2021.
Yeah, I think that it increasingly looks like that is the case, and we should not lead people to believe that we're going to be able to hold those events, and we also need to turn staff loose from trying to hold open that possibility so that they can apply their efforts elsewhere to work on things that are going to happen. So I think that that's probably true. Do you just want kind of a consensus, or are you going to have some more formal direction from...
If you have any serious disagreement, I would need to know now. Operationally speaking, I can't see how, just from a liability standpoint, we'd even want to go there. So I'm strongly recommending that you just allow me to make this decision and we move on. And we can reevaluate it at the end of summer.
Yeah. Questions then, Councilor Lehan?
Yes, I just wanted to ask where this puts us with our rental of our facilities. Are you including that also? So the barn is not available?
Everything.
Are we canceling weddings till fall or what?
Canceling, everything is canceled through the end of August. And then we would have to revisit it at the end of August and probably extend it even further into fall, depending on what kinds of new orders we get from our governor.
So even people who want to reserve a picnic area, that they're not reservable, is that correct?
I just don't see how we're going to be able to reopen our facilities this summer, given everything that we're dealing with right now.
Well, I don't know how many we have, how many we have out there that are already reserved that are need to be canceled, but that would be an interesting thing to know in terms of things like weddings and other events that people have scheduled.
I could certainly come back to you with a list of what we have. We've been telling people that we're not allowing, I think through the end of May is what we've said right now, and then we would revisit it. I'm hearing some talk about maybe loosening some of the social distancing stuff by the West Coast governors maybe in mid-May, but I still don't know what that means. I just don't see how we're going to be able to get back and have large gatherings of people with no testing. So my recommendation would be just to cancel everything through the end of August, just to be on the safe side.
Council good with that?
I think on my mic.
It's difficult, I understand. Councilor West again?
Can you guys hear me or see me okay?
Yes, can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I can see everybody just fine. I don't know why you can't see me. Is there a way that it would be prudent to look at this month by month and just maybe assess month by month as things change so rapidly with this than to go so far out as August?
The problem is that people have to lock things down. We have event guides that we have to print, and if we're putting that kind of money, timing, and effort into that, and then we're saying it may or may not happen, I just don't think it's a good use of city resources right now. There's too many unknowns, and I'm not sure on the liability front what kind of clearance we're going to get from the governor on this. She might go from no more than 25 to no more than 50. I don't know where she's going to end up. up. If you want to give me the flexibility to look at it month by month, that's fine. I don't know what that means in terms of how we plan and market that. You know, put your money down and you may or may not be able to use the facility is basically what we'll be telling people.
I think I'm not opposed to the put the money down, and that's not a bad idea. Like, you can get a refund. We'll see month to month. But I think that, and some things are nuanced, right? If somebody already has a July wedding planned or something, to allow them to say, we're looking at a month by month, but we may not have any event space for you. I think people will have some understanding around that. It's just changing so fast, and, you know, we could see things open up quite a bit more. We could see things go, we don't know if there's going to be a second wave of COVID, but just being maybe a little bit more flexible, but allowing, I think it's good to allow Brian to kind of make those decisions, but with a little bit more flexibility.
Councilor Linville, we're over time here. Go ahead. You're muted.
I would just agree with Councilor West. I guess I understand the need to plan way out. I just am kind of concerned about if we continue to have restrictions that are greater than what the governor has or the state has. I would like to revisit that at some point, so that we don't override what we might do. I'd like to revisit this again when we have a little more time.
Can I say one quick thing?
Councilor Lehan.
I see this in two different categories, which is why I brought up the wedding thing. But and that is, I think it's fine for the city to cancel all of our stuff, all of the city's stuff through until after Labor Day anyway. The only ones I had a question about were like July, August, somebody else is having the event. I mean, we don't want to prepare for an event that we can't put on. So, but if somebody else is having a family picnic or something and is reserved picnic area C, and it's the end of August, then that's, then I feel a little bit differently about that, because we're not putting any staff time into their event. And so anyway, I could see waiting on if they have reserved, as long as we are clear that we could cancel if circumstances change with regards to COVID. But I think we should go ahead and cancel all the city-sponsored stuff.
Is council good with doing that? Kind of different things that we will not produce events, but we would revisit periodically things other people can do in light of the current situation? I'm seeing agreement to that. Mr. Cosgrove, can you work with that?
Yes, that's good direction. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. So we are due to be starting our regular meeting. I need to take a break for a minute. Why don't we take whatever we need, 5 minutes or something, and let our technical people, if they need to do anything. And
yeah, we need 5 to
Lehan needs 10. Is that?
Yeah, 5 to 7 minutes, Mayor, to transition to the regular meeting.
Okay, and maybe we can figure out how to get picture Mr. West back.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. We'll see what we